So last night we went to go see Wonka, which is the sort of like reboot prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, starring Timothy Chalamet, the kid from Dune. We went to this movie because there's kind of like nothing really else that was out that we were interested in seeing. And so I kind of went into this movie with the assumption that I was going to be pretty bored, and I wasn't. I actually found this movie to be pretty interesting. I'm not going to go as far as to say like it was good, but it was really interesting because there was a lot going on, and it definitely kept my attention in terms of just trying to sort of figure out where I landed and how I felt about this movie. And for the first time ever, I actually took notes while in the theater because I had so many things that I didn't want to forget about, because I knew that this review would be the most challenging for me to really nail down about my feelings towards this movie. I felt like this movie didn't really know where it wanted to land in terms of its reception and who its audience was. And what I mean by that, it almost felt like in some scenes it was a different movie than other scenes. For a lot of it, it had sort of this mystical, fun, playful seriousness. And then in some of the scenes, in fact, a whole chunk of the movie, I felt a feeling of nostalgia, and I was like, what? Why do I feel almost nostalgia watching this? And it was because it reminded me so much of watching VHSs when I was sick as a kid. So we're talking about movies like Babe, 101 Dalmatians, this sort of funny, sped up silliness where like all the character faces were really like, you know, over, whoa, slipping on a banana peel kind of a silliness. And then in other scenes, it was very this slow, melodic, beautiful, mysterious, mystical kind of a feeling. And those feelings weren't really transitioned. They were kind of hard cut against each other. And it felt a little jarring where you were like, oh, okay, we're watching this movie now. Okay, now it's this kind of a movie. So I don't have an issue with that, but because it kind of worked in its favor in terms of it kept me engaged, because I was always like, no, yeah, okay, let me get the things that I didn't like out of the way first. The biggest, most glaringly obvious thing that isn't unique to this movie, but the musical numbers, I think some of them were good and then others were very lazy. So this movie obviously is trying to take a page from the older ones and be sort of a musical kind of, you know, a little bit of a stage musical thing. There's a lot of musical numbers throughout the entire movie. I don't think the musical numbers are always necessarily moving the story forward, but they are always communicating a feeling that the character is feeling. So it's not a narrative-driven music, it's more of a show tune, entertainment, dancing kind of thing. Even when the music is good, what I found issue with is the vocals are so over-processed, it feels like they're recording them for the Spotify playlist and not for the movie. And what I mean by that is once the character starts singing, the voice and the processing sounds completely studio. It no longer sounds like it exists within the environment. For example, when they're singing in a warehouse, their voices are echoed while they're talking, and as soon as they start singing, the echo goes away, the processing comes in, the vocals are right at the front. It would be similar if I said, I love you versus I love you. It pulls me out of the universe. Suddenly I just remember that I'm watching a movie, and I'm remembering that people are singing this in a studio and not on stage, and that all the characters are lip syncing this, because it no longer sounds like something that exists within the universe. It's just a song that I'm listening to almost on headphones. There's a lot of comedy throughout, and again, like everything else, the comedy ranges. I can't say from bad to good, but from certain jokes that just didn't land with me personally.
For an Oompa Loompa.
An Oompa what now?
And then other things that I found really funny. There was a sort of story arc within a police officer played by Keegan-Michael Key, where he slowly gets fatter throughout the movie as he's eating more chocolate. And I thought that was really just brilliant. And to that point, I really think that Keegan-Michael Key's performance was like way funnier than beyond this movie. I think he played this part so fantastically that he almost stood out. Now, a lot of those cast members are very talented comedic actors, like Rich Fulcher, who I was very delighted to see as someone who's a big fan of Snuffbox and Mighty Boosh. I just thought Michael Key really stood out and did a fantastic job. I think there were parts of the Wonka sort of character story arc storytelling that were really well done. They had a great way of sort of towing the line of this sort of believability versus magic. You know, he was a magician, but only by heart, and that the magic existed more in him and less so in the universe, and wasn't actually magic, but it was sort of like his own perception and the people's perception around him about how positive he was. But at times it slipped in and out of believability within the universe. So I kind of wish I could have seen them lean into the magic aspect of Wonka a little bit more, because they were wanting to make it believable, but then there is just these spikes of unbelievability. And so I think they were really onto something good with that, and I would have liked to maybe see a couple different drafts or revisions of that aspect of the character. When I think of the photography, there were some really great shots. I mean, at the end of the day, there were a couple moments where there are these big ensemble choreography dance routines within the music. And it's not very often that we see one of those movies without a big title like Les Mis or something that we already have established as a musical. So I think there was a good amount of risk taking with that, and I think it paid off. I have to enjoy the fact that they made this sort of an ensemble musical kind of vibe to it. But again, with every other aspect of what I have to say about this movie, it was kind of inconsistent. The cinematography at sometimes was super bland in whole sections of scenes, and then other times there were just these really interesting shots that were fun to watch. For example, there's an overhead shot of people dancing. There's a couple of those, and those are really cool. Those are interesting and unique and fun to look at. Yeah, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, this movie felt like it was made by 3 different people all at the same time, with 3 different kind of intentions of what they wanted this to be, with 3 different audiences that they wanted it to be for. I think that's a great thing, but it just didn't feel as cohesive as I think that the director had intended. I don't think it's a bad movie. I actually really would recommend seeing this. I don't think it's a rush out and see it in theaters kind of a movie, but it is certainly much better than I expected it to be. Maybe that's because I went in with much lower expectations. But if you're a fan of the Wonka franchise in any capacity, it's definitely worth watching, but don't expect some sort of a fantastic movie. I think there's some laughs throughout, but yeah, I don't know. I came out pretty surprised in a positive way. I would give it a 6 out of 10.